Hi everyone, my name is Miss Halpern and today we are going to learn about an artist named Jackson Pollock. So what I would encourage you to do first is with a parent, go on to Google Images and type in Jackson Pollock's name and look at some of his artwork. I'm going to show you one of his pieces here. This is called Lavender Mist. And what I want you to think about as you are looking at this is a few things. So the first is, what do you notice about this painting? And how is it different than other paintings that you may have seen? And the last question is, how do you think that the artist, Jackson Pollock, painted this? What method would he have used to paint this? So think about those things. You can pause the video and I'll have them in the information section below. And you can either write down your answers or you can share with a parent, or if you have a sibling with you, you can talk with them about it. Okay, so pause this video and just think about those questions. So now we're going to read Action Jackson by Jan Greenberg and Sandra Jordan. In the afternoon, Jackson Pollock put on his painted splattered boots and walks across the yard. The wind blows in from Gardiner's Bay, bringing the scent of salt marshes and sea lavender. His eyes miss nothing: sunlight on the tree branches, tangled stalks of blackberry bushes, beetles crawling in the grass underfoot. Caw, caw! The crow he tamed flies down and lands on his shoulders. His border collie, Gip, runs in circles, demanding a walk across the fields and down a country road to the wide sandy beach. But Jackson turns and keeps going. Right, so for this page, what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes and just visualize what I'm going to read to you here, because there's a lot of really great imagery to make pictures in your mind with here. The gray weathered barn used to be filled with rusted machinery, old fishing gear, and broken tools. Now, it's his art studio, a place for painting. Some artists put a canvas on an easel or hang it on a wall. Not Jackson. He spreads his out like a sheet, smoothing it flat with his large hands. He wants his paintings to be big, big as the sky out west where he grew up, flat as the marshland behind the house. Sunlight pokes through cracks in the boards, and flies buzz in the dusty studio air. Sliding doors rattle on their frames. He sits, silent, on the floor, staring at the blank canvas. Okay, so you can open your eyes now and just think about what you were visualizing when I read that to you. Some artists cover the canvas with a base coat of white paint. Not Jackson. He wants the paint to soak into the surface, leaving bare patches peeking through the stains of color. Some painters use oil paint or watercolors. Not Jackson. He'll use ordinary house paint from the hardware store to make this painting. Some artists paint pictures of flowers or people or landscapes. Not Jackson. He expresses his thoughts and feelings directly on the canvas, calling it energy and motion made visible. And still he sits, surrounded by the cans of enamel, brushes stiff with dried paint, knives, sticks, spatula, and canvases, waiting. At last he stands. He chooses a stick and dips it into a can of syrupy paint. Slowly, he circles the canvas, stepping around the edges, straddling the corners. Black lines form a tangled web. Now he chooses a brush, working toward the middle. Sprays of color, tan, teal, yellow, and white. An athlete with a paintbrush, he uses his whole body to make the painting. Layers build with each gesture, new colors emerging, blending, and disappearing into the wet surface. He swoops and leaps like a dancer, paint trailing from a brush that doesn't touch the canvas. I want to make a longer and longer line. I want it to keep going. Hours go by like minutes. Suddenly he feels exhausted, used up, his inspiration gone. Things get in the way of the flow, like roots blocking a soil line. He puts down the brush and goes into the house to help make supper, his mind filled with thoughts about the wet paint back on the studio floor. The next afternoon, Jackson prowls around the canvas, studying his work, but he doesn't pick up a brush. Instead, he walks the beaches past the sandy marches and the tall spartina grass that waves in the breeze. He spends hours sitting on a grassy dune, watching the gulls. In the barn, layers of paint dry. Almost a week passes before he dips a brush and begins his dance. What is he thinking? Does he see the sunlit beach, the pattern of waves, the interlacing branches of the trees, the lush summer grass outside his studio? I don't know where my pictures come from. They just come, and the paint flows. Like the Native American sand painters he saw as a boy out west, he moves around the canvas, coaxing the paint into loops and curves. On the floor, I am much more at ease. I can walk around it, work from the four sides, be in the painting. Twisting ropes of white, spangles of silver, a lavender glow where pink and blue-black meet. Jackson listens to jazz recordings in the evenings. He likes the musicians who improvise, inventing their own melodies as they play. While he paints, the notes spin over and over in his memory. Swish and swish again. The rhythm of the brush matches the rhythm of the music. If a penny fell out of his pocket, he would leave it. An insect lands in the wet paint, and there it stays. Nails and tacks become part of the texture. He caresses the surface with sticky paint-stained hands. One, then two, handprints across the canvas. So let's pause here and let's think again about the questions we talked about in the beginning. So one of the questions was, how does he create these paintings? So think about what we talked about. How is he moving the paint to get on the canvas? So think about that, and you can either write down your answer, pause the video, or you can talk with someone if you have a sibling there with you. And then the other thing is you want to think about, what does he do differently than most artists do? Because we heard quite a few examples of things that might have surprised you as you heard about them, right? For example, I'll give one of the things that I thought about. When they talk about if a penny falls onto his artwork or a bug flies into it, he just leaves it. And I think that that's pretty unique for an artist. So try and think about those. And again, you can write them down, or you can talk with someone there who's with you. Okay? All right, let's keep reading. His eyes move up and down, back and forth. With light steps, he follows the sweep of his brush. He stops in a pool of paint, pauses. Paint, paint, and more paint, dripping, pouring, flinging. The paint has a life of its own. I try to let it come through. Again, he stops. He climbs a ladder to look down at the whole canvas. Every muscle aches, but his eyes, his mind, and his heart know the painting is finished. This is what we looked at the beginning. This is called Lavender Mist. Some people will be shocked when they see what he has created. Some angry, some confused, some excited, some filled with happiness they can hardly explain, but everyone will agree Jackson Pollock is doing something original, painting in a way that no one has ever seen before. So when we look at art, we often feel an emotion as we look at it. And so they talk about how when you look at this, you might feel differently than someone else who views it. So just take a moment to pause and think about how this painting makes you feel. Does it make you feel angry, confused, excited, or maybe something else? For the next few days, he and his wife Lee plant the vegetable garden. They drive into town in their Model A Ford. He digs for clams on the beach. On the weekends, friends drop by for a party. It will take another week for the thick paint to dry. Then Jackson and Lee will tack the canvas to the studio wall. Jackson sits silent, staring at the blank canvas spread on the floor of the barn, waiting. Soon he will dip his brush in a can of paint, lifting it high in the air to begin again. And that's the end of our story. So now what we're going to do is we're going to give you an opportunity to create something that is similar to Jackson Pollock's style. It'll be all your own, but you're going to use the style that you learned about here. So if you need to, you can go back to Google Images to try and look at some of his work if you want some inspiration, or you might be ready to start now. So you're going to need a few things. I recommend like large poster board. And you're going to want paints in different colors. I like these because they have the wide opening so you could get the whole brush in there. And you'll just dip it in. And you'll see that that's going to make it easier to fling on some of that paint. So I have... You can get whatever colors you want, but these are the 3 colors that I have. And you're going to want a paintbrush. Doesn't really matter what size. And you're going to want a stick. So even if you don't have anything at home, you could even use like a branch that's fallen down, like a stick that's fallen down, or a painter's stick would be really good. And you're going to want to make sure that you're wearing clothes that can get dirty. And I would recommend doing this absolutely outside, so pick a nice day to do this. And if you want, you can also have some jazz music playing just like Jackson did, just to really get into it, okay? So I'm gonna now show you outside the different techniques that he used before you get started. Okay, so now that you have all your supplies, you're going to start by putting down your poster board and have your paints ready and your paintbrush. So there's 3 different techniques that you can use, and I'm going to show you those before you get started on your own work. So I'm going to pick one of my colors, okay? And the first one is to go a little bit away from your painting and just to flick it back so that it splatters like that. So I could show you that again. You just flick it back. And again, this is why we're working outside, okay? So our next technique is to go into the paint, and you can fling your brush like that so that you see that it is creating thicker lines than when we were doing the flicking, okay? And then the last one is to drip, and it's going to create some things that are similar to that, but I'm going to dip my brush in. And if you have a paint that's a little bit, mine's pretty thick, but if you have one that's more watery, you can move this around in swirls, and it's going to create nice lines across your painting. There we go. So that's what you're looking for when you're doing it with this technique. Just moving it around, and you can move it in swirls and loops, okay? So I'm just gonna keep working on mine, getting all those different colors on there. And then, just like Jackson Pollock did, at some point I'm gonna stand and see if I feel like it's finished. And I like the way it is right now, so this is gonna be my painting. And again, if you want to start this, make sure you get your supplies, and you can have a little jazz music playing in the background just like Jackson Pollock did. And once you're finished, I'd love for you to share with me what you created. Have fun.